Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this new edition of Up Close Stories, Objects, and Ideas from Beyond the Galleries. This is the Royal Alberta Museum virtual talk series. My name is Eleonora Sermoneta, and I'm the adult learning programmer here at RAM, and I will be your host during this talk. Before we start our talk, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that the land upon which we stand is Treaty 6 territory, the traditional territory of the Cree and Nakota peoples, and a homeland to the Métis. This space continues to be a gathering place for generations of Dene, Blackfoot, Tsuut'ina, Saulteaux, and Inuit peoples. We honor the cultures, languages, and histories of the indigenous peoples of this land. All right, so during the talk session, we will have a presentation by Pat, who is one of our museum experts, and the presentation will be followed by a live Q&A session. So if you have questions, any questions, please feel free to type them in our chat or use the Q&A features. That's really up to you. I will be monitoring both the chat and the Q&A feature, so we are sure we don't skip any questions. And today's talk is Collecting a Pandemic: Why, How, and What. Our speaker, Pat Myers, is going to share with us her experience with rapid response collecting and show us what objects and stories the Royal Alberta Museum is collecting to document the current COVID-19 pandemic. Pat is the Curator of Work, Life and Industry at the Royal Alberta Museum. She has spent her career in heritage in Alberta and has worked on teams developing historic sites and preserving heritage buildings. She's the author of several publications of Alberta history and contributed to the centennial history of Alberta, Alberta Formed, Alberta Transformed. So Pat, thank you very much for joining us today. The floor is yours. Feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, Eleonora, and thank you everyone for coming. I'm going to share my screen. I was thrilled when Eleonora asked me to speak on this topic because it's something that the human history section has been working on for the past couple of years. And I think this quote really sums up why we are collecting right now in this moment. Because people will want to know, audiences of the future will have questions about this crazy time. So, rapid response collecting. What is it? Well, it's not waiting. It's making sure that we have items from this moment that we collected in this moment. It was pretty clear right from the start that the pandemic would have an incredible impact on the history of the province. And we wanted to make sure that we would have a good start at putting items in our collection that would be able to talk to this period, to audiences of the future. So in the beginning, very early on in the pandemic, my husband and I were out walking, one of those pandemic approved activities in the early days of lockdown in our neighborhood, and I came across this sign and I thought, I need to have that. So I tracked down the manufacturer and got one in our collection, generously donated by Alberta Traffic Supply, who made these signs. And the reason I wanted it was because it is absolutely unequivocally from this moment. It actually has COVID-19 on it. It has, that marvelous stop sign in the middle. Stay back 2 meters. And Alberta Traffic Supply would customize the sign for whoever ordered it, for the company that ordered it. So the one I saw in our neighborhood was Epcor, but this is the generic one, and this is the one that we have in our collection, and it was one of the first rapid response collecting pieces that I took in, and it's just of this moment, and I'm thrilled that we have it. This is another really good example of rapid response collecting, and this was brought to me by a former staff member. She too was out walking in a park, and she came across this CD in a bag pinned to a bush. So she took it and she brought it to us, and it came with a printout of what is on the CD, which, as you can imagine, is all about claiming the pandemic is a hoax, and it urges the finder of this piece to make copies and hand them out. So this too is very useful to our collection, both as an example of rapid response collecting, but also one of the items that will allow us to talk about the complexities of the public reaction and experience of this time. But this little glass vial is one of the best responses of rapid response, one of the best examples of rapid response collecting that we have to date. And this is the vial from the first COVID-19 vaccine administered in Alberta. A respiratory therapist at the University of Alberta Hospital received the first Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine on Thursday, December 15th, 2020 at approximately 4 p.m. And that's the vial that her vaccine came from. And had we not worked with Alberta Health Services, had we, not been right there in the moment, we would not have this vial. And this represents one of the, well, it doesn't represent, it is one of the pivotal moments in the history of the pandemic in Alberta, one of the defining moments of the history of this pandemic. And to have it in our collection is truly exciting, but we would not have gotten it if we had not actively pursued it when it was happening. We are also very fortunate to have the vial from the first vaccine administered in Calgary, and it was just a little later on that same day. Objects, stories, meaning. Rapid response collecting provides the opportunity to collect the stories the objects tell firsthand. Museums use objects to tell stories and help audiences see history through objects, how they were used, what they mean, and the associations people have with them. Without stories, to me anyway, objects are just things. Masks. Well, it's not too difficult to conclude early on that masks would play a part in the experience of this pandemic and would likely become one of the most recognizable objects. So we wanted to make sure that we have some in our collection. Let's just pop back a minute to 1918 and the influenza epidemic. Then this is a bank in Calgary. You can see all the employees are wearing their masks. And here's how they made them. This information was readily available in newspapers and from the Department of Health. We don't have one of these masks in our collection. Would I like one? Absolutely. So we wanted to make sure that that wouldn't happen in this pandemic. Mask making began right away. And this is an example of a mask making kit with instructions. The kit was distributed by Designer's Choice Resource Center in Calgary to people who were volunteering to sew the masks. They took fabric donations, which were first cleaned by Fishman's personal care cleaners, and then the kits were made up. The Resource Center used their machines to cut the fabric into mask-sized pieces. They packaged them, and then those packages went to the volunteer sewers. Other volunteers made the strings for the masks and bent the nose wires. And you might be able to see that it also includes information on where to find further mask making info and patterns. Now this is a lovely little mask, and we have two made by this person, Aurelia Girard. She was 7 years old, and she wanted to help too. She sewed masks, she sold them for $5 each, and donated the money to the food bank, Black Lives Matter, and other initiatives. A colleague brought Aurelia and her mask making to my attention, and I contacted them, and yes, she wanted to donate, and she donated two, and I'm just thrilled that we have two. And Aurelia's actions remind us of the intertwining of history storylines and represent an individual need to what she saw in her community. This is a sewing machine that broke under the strain of sewing so many masks. So it's really nice to have this end of the process represented in our collection. It's quite a small machine. And here are some examples of the masks that it produced. Masks came to be fashion statements or loyalty statements. We have Edmonton Oilers. Companies, individuals, organizations were all involved in mask making. We, of course, have the Calgary Flames. This is a mask from a company in Calgary, a menswear company. They have they produced very stylish masks. We have a couple in our collection, and we also have this one, which includes the Black Lives Matter symbols. So again, the converging storylines are important when you're doing rapid response. And I'm thrilled that we have these stylish examples of masks in our collection as well. Now, here we have one of our conservators, Alison Fleming. And you can see how she has crossed the strings on her mask to get a better fit. And I'm just going to move to the next close-up right now, and then we'll come back to Alison. And what I want you to look at here are the staples right at the bottom of her mask. And that is to make the mask smaller so it fits her face. You can just sort of see it under her chin there. It's laughingly called the turkey mask because those staples create a little waddle. But it shows how people worked with their PPE to make it work for them. So this is a really neat object. Thank you, Alison. And another part of the experience that we wanted to make sure we were, that we would have things in our collection that could speak to, was Alberta companies pivoting to produce products required by pandemic conditions. This is Daryl Dahl of Certified Radio. He got in touch. They were making face shields. They laser cut the pieces for the face shields and then hand assembled them. The shields were donated to hospitals and emergency responders. This is a close-up of two of the shields and the mask buddies. Those are the ones right at the bottom. The ones with the larger circles are for people with ponytails, because the ponytail could go through that hole. And mask buddies attach to the strings of your mask and take some of the pressure off your ears. Hand sanitizer. Breweries and distilleries across the province turned to producing hand sanitizer. So we have collected bottles from these products and an empty can or two of what their usual production was, so we can tell the whole story of what they were as an industry and how they pivoted. These examples come from Cowtown Brewing in Didsbury, and Bhupinder Gill got in touch with us and offered these bottles, and of course we said yes. We also have material from the Fort Distillery in Fort Saskatchewan, and what's interesting about this one, as well as the bottles of sanitizer, two examples, and then the bottle of their normal product, is they included something from the process. So that will allow us to talk about how the sanitizer was mixed, how they figured out what ingredients worked. Yes, bears. Here come the bears. This is Section 35 Farm Distillery near Viking, and their usual product is a honey liqueur. So their hand sanitizer was packaged in honey bear bottles and bottles resembling hives. And here are two of the ones that we have. So this is their production line. The bottles have been filled but not labeled. And here are two in our collection. And I think this is a good opportunity, a good point to talk a little bit about how objects donated to our collections are used. Exhibition isn't the only way that objects make an impact. This kind of talk is one example. Another example is programming. And Eleonora, the organizer of this lecture series, developed a People and Plagues tour at the start of the pandemic. The tour touches on stories involving epidemics in the gallery, such as polio, such as smallpox. And smallpox is the story that this slide represents. This is a beaded representation of the smallpox virus, which is in the gallery. It talks about disease and immunity and uses beaded representations of viruses and bacterium. And Eleonora finishes her tour by showing some of the COVID-19 objects we have collected and discusses with the visitors how the pandemic can be interpreted through objects. It's really popular. It gets a terrific reception from the visitors, and it confirms the importance of rapid response collecting and the hunger of museum audiences to explore and understand cataclysmic events. So I'm sure Eleonora could field a couple of questions about it if you are interested. And this is another example of something we've taken in our pandemic collecting. It's a puzzle. Ryaz Sharan, owner of RSS Designs here in Edmonton, made puzzles from some of his poster images. His friends and husband had urged him to do this, knowing people were searching for activities to do in lockdown. So this object tells a number of stories. It tells a story of business, it tells a story of creativity, and it tells the story of life during lockdown. I took this puzzle to a museum school session I did with a grade 5 class, and it sparked a lot of discussion. Many of the students talked about doing puzzles when they were at home, as well as other things that they had done. So that's another way that objects are used that's not exhibition. Cloth bags. This is a great story. In the early days of the pandemic, spring of 2020, the Catholic Women's League of Our Lady of Perpetual Help Sherwood Park got an emergency call to see if it would be possible to have 200 cloth bags sewn in very short notice so lunches could be taken safely to the homeless and inner city residents, because of course they could no longer serve in person. So the women responded in spades, sewed almost 300 bags, and with the help of the Knights of Columbus, they filled the bags and took them to the inner city pastoral ministry. Women sewed the bags from material they already had. They created handles from fabric scraps and skate laces and whatever they had on hand. So this is another fantastic example of community response. And here is one of the sewers, Corey Viken, working away on a bag. You can see all the material around her. You can see at the bottom right and sort of the top left that she is also a mask maker and has switched momentarily to making bags. Here are part of the group filling the bags with the food. All the filled bags and boxes lined up on the stairway in Corey's home. And here they are at the inner city pastoral ministry, ready to be handed out. Finding new ways through. The pandemic has changed how we do a lot of things, and we wanted to make sure that we could talk about that story too. How will the pandemic change the province in the long term, in the short term? How did people adapt to changing social and health measures? Rapid response collecting helps us start to give some answers to those questions. These are a couple of objects from early on. You can see it's a t-shirt with Dr. Hinshaw's image and the bag. And the bag I particularly wanted because that speaks to curbside pickup, which was one of the business innovations that really took off Is this going to stay as an option? Will this be a lasting change in the commercial landscape? So that's the story that this rather innocuous looking bag can help tell. Schools, graduation ceremonies, suddenly you couldn't have them. So lawn signs marked the occasion and celebrated the graduates. Taylor and Michaela Kirchner graduated from Austin O'Brien High School during the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is an example of an object that tells the story of how people found new ways to do things in the pandemic. In this case, marking important occasions. Again, we're coming back to Eleonora, which is just fantastic. And this is one of the objects we added to our collection that documents the move to online events, schooling, meetings, family conversations. Online became a defining feature of the pandemic experience. Eleonora participated in Canada's first cross-country virtual citizenship ceremony. As a thank you for her participation, the Institute for Canadian Citizenship sent Eleonora this mask, a card, and a sticker. We have those items in our collection now because Eleonora donated them, and it helps us speak to the incredible importance of the virtual world during the pandemic. Resilience and just keeping going. We wanted to make sure we had a start at some objects that would speak to just what it was like living here in this moment. This is a mask from Verna Sorensen in Calgary, who was a quilter, but she immediately switched to making masks. She made over 1,000 masks. And then she made a quilt from the leftover bits. And if you can remember from Kobe's slide where she was making the bags, there are lots of bits. I just couldn't bear to throw them out, she said. So here they are. RAM has a marvelous quilt collection, and now we have a pandemic quilt to add to that. But it's also an example of Verna, in a way, accepting the pandemic into her life, interpreting it through what she knew, which was quilting. A colleague texted me this sign after driving home one night, and I thought, oh, that's pretty nice. I want one of those. It advertises, it's from Regent Signs, and it advertises some of their products that became ubiquitous in the pandemic, the social distancing stickers, plexiglass shields. We've got you, COVID. And when I contacted them, I talked to Michelle Bolduc, the office manager, and she said, well, everybody needs a laugh right now. And I thought, you are so right, Michelle. And now, thank you to Regent Signs, we have one of these signs in our collection. RAM was very excited to be one of the sites. This is not RAM, I'm sorry to say, but one of the sites of Monique Martin's installation called Context is Everything, which was part of the works in 2020. And it used paper mache dandelions to symbolize strength and resilience. They appeared in various locations in Alberta's downtown, including RAM's gift shop window. This is Michelle's production line. And we are thrilled to have 5 of these dandelions in our collection, which can speak to our pandemic resilience. The town of Beaver Lodge got in touch. They had come up with a Christmas ornament for the upside down year 2020. So yes, humor, but also speaking to just how many things changed and how quickly. So we're really happy to have this. This is Jeanette Marcotte. Jeanette, for many years, has been part of a knitting group that make bears for the Grey Nuns Community Hospital. The bears are given to children and to dementia patients who come into emergency. They give the patients comfort and are very calming. Jeanette has continued to knit during the pandemic. And in fact, when I was chatting with her last week, she said knitting got me through the pandemic. So we are thrilled to have in our collection a couple of examples of Jeanette's usual production and an example of her COVID bear. You can see she has knit the bear, she's put a little mask on it. So Jeanette in her bears is a perfect example of how objects can tell stories about resilience, perseverance, and daily life. And I thought we'd end sort of like we started. We started with walking and my story. Well, this is where I have spent a fair bit of the last couple of years working from home. This is my little workstation in my basement, working from home. Another change from pandemic conditions. How is that going to affect our cultural, social, and personal landscapes? And that is something that we will also want to make sure we have items that can speak to working from home, or WFH as we call it. And here are a couple of things that were always on my desk, my water mug, and a lovely little painted rock. Again, we were out walking about a year ago. It was really early in the morning, a hot day. And a young boy in our neighborhood, Simon, already had his art stand set up, and he had his paintings and he had his painted rock. So we bought one of each. And I love this rock, the sun pouring down and the fluffy clouds on the blue sky. So this has been one of my constant companions when I've been working from home. But I also realized when I was thinking about working from home and what it had meant, and one of the things that I realized was before every Zoom meeting, every team meeting, I would rush upstairs and brush my hair. So this is my lowly hairbrush, but to me, it means, yeah, I'm working from home, I'm in my basement, I miss my colleagues, but I want them to know that I'm okay. So up I go and I brush my hair. And when I was really thinking about it, for me, that was what kept coming up. So there you have it, my hairbrush. This is just some sidewalk art in my neighborhood. And I just wanted to finish here with the cracked heart, and to thank you for letting me share part of RAM's pandemic collecting experience with you. This collecting is ongoing, and we expect, as people reflect on their experiences, to continue to acquire different types of objects and their stories that talk about this moment in our history. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat, for sharing these compelling stories with us. And well, now we are going to transition into the second part of the program, And we're going to receive your questions. So if you could please, Pat, stop sharing the screen. Okay, wonderful. And I can change the view. So we have a gallery with what was speaking. Okay. So yeah, as I anticipated at the beginning of the program, we are going to welcome your questions. Feel free to use the chat or the Q&A feature. And yeah, so we can perhaps expand on stories or, just respond to any curiosity or question you may have. And I'll be monitoring everything so we don't miss any of your questions. Don't worry, we're going to respond to everything. Okay, let's give it some time, and I'm sure that they will pop up very soon. Yeah, as Pat mentioned, we are doing some programs that relate with the pandemic, and we show the objects that our curatorial team has been collecting. But we also ask our visitors to provide some input about what they would like to see in our pandemic collection. So if you want us to tell what you think would be a good fit for our pandemic collection, again, let us know, because we value your input, and we want to make sure that the things that we represent in our collections reflect the real experience of Albertans during these crazy times. So yeah, just let us know. All right, I guess we have our first question. So Anthony says, thank you for the presentation. And he's wondering if there's any item that you couldn't or decide not to collect. And if yes, why?
Not at this point, no. I mean, we don't accept everything because, we sort of look at what we already have and is it telling the same story? But no, we haven't rejected anything that I'm aware of. We do want to tell the hard stories as well as the uplifting ones, and things like masks and the COVID vial, the vaccine vial, can be used in both ways. You can talk about how masks became a flashpoint for certain things, or the different opinions and on vaccination. So we can approach some of the harder stories through those objects, but no, I don't think we've rejected anything.
And I have another question from the chat. So one of the visitors is asking if it was difficult to get the first vaccine vials.
Well, I wasn't involved in that, but I would say, from what I understand from my colleague, Matt, that it really wasn't, because we worked with Alberta Health Services, and they were very, very thrilled and willing to help put this in our collection, because they too knew that it was just such a pivotal moment. So no, I would say no, it wasn't.
And we have a couple of great questions coming up. So the first one is, do you have anything that represents people's quest for making sourdough bread at home? I did miss my first 5 minutes of the presentation.
I do not, but that is indeed part of the experience. So if you have something, get in touch on our general contact line.
Yeah, that was a really interesting question. I guess everybody picked up many different hobbies or specialized in something, and baking for sure became a really popular activity all of a sudden, right? With all this free time, baking saved us in a way. So yeah, I picked many of those baking activities myself, definitely. And I have a question from Bruno. So Bruno is asking, how can he donate something to the collections? That's a great question. Thank you, Bruno.
That's a very good question, and you should first get in contact. Do you want me to put that in the chat?
Oh, yes, please, Pat. Sure. Feel free to share our contact information.
Yeah. So get in contact on our general contact, which I will put in the chat, and then one of us will get back to you. We generally ask for a photo of what you're offering and any information about it, stories that will help us in our assessment of whether that's something we would like to add. Okay, here we go.
All right, thank you very much. Yes, definitely. We're always on the hand for, oh, please go ahead, Pat.
No, I was just going to say that was a great question.
Yeah, we're always on the hand to get new items for our collections, and obviously your input is just phenomenal. And I have another question. So thank you very much for the presentation and for helping to document this historical pandemic. I found the intersections of cultural events particularly poignant: Black Lives Matter, human remains found at residential school sites, etc. Are there plans to create a feature exhibit beyond the Peoples and Flags, or perhaps a traveling exhibit in collaboration with other Canadian museums?
That is a great question too. There are no plans right now that I am aware of, no. I mean, we are still actively collecting, so you know, it may be a bit premature, but no, we have no plans right now.
And I just want to point out that we actually had an exhibition from July to October 2021 that was called Breathe, Creating Resilience Through Traditional Art. And we hosted this beautiful exhibition in collaboration with many different Indigenous artists. They created these masks as a response, you know, to document their experience during the pandemic. And so that was, in a way, a sort of events that fitted, you know, that intersection between the current pandemic and different life-changing, history-changing events. Okay. More questions coming up. Okay. So Alison is asking, have you rapid response collected around other recent historical events? That's a good one.
I'm sorry.
So, sorry, I'm retrieving that question. Okay, so have you rapid response collected around other recent historical events?
Yes, we have been to some of the protests. We have collected signs from the climate change. We have collected material from Black Lives Matter. Those would be a couple of the most recent examples. Yeah. So we try for sure to make sure that, you know, things that may not survive, like a protest sign, we have a couple of examples because they are often the things that don't last. They're homemade. People use them and then they're forgotten. So it's less likely that we will be offered those kinds of things. So yes, we have some of those in our collection.
And one of our visitors in the chat is writing that Breathe was incredible. So, okay, I just wanted to acknowledge that comment. So thank you very much, Sean, for sharing your experience with that exhibit. It was indeed a beautiful one. And we have another comment. Oh, I guess this one I can take. So one of the visitors is asking if we're still offering the program about the epidemics in Alberta. Yes, I just want to point out that the Peoples and Flags tour is still available. We have 5 dates coming up on April all the way to June. So make sure to check our website. Maybe I can share the link to the tour dates, because yes, we are going to end this tour at the end of June. This is actually something that we created to accompany the Breed exhibition, but then we decided to extend it because all those beautiful stories that Pat shared, they are captured in the program as well. So I just sent you the link. There we go. And I have another person who asked us how many people joined us today. So far we are 33 people connected and interacting around pandemic stories. And I have some more questions from the chat. So, do you have any newspaper clippings in your collection?
No, that is not something we would normally collect. If they came in as part of a larger donation, we might, but that is more archival in nature. That would be more the provincial archives. So we don't seek those out, no. And newspapers are fairly readily available too, but we don't, as a general rule, collect that kind of item. That's an archival item and would be the provincial archives.
And we also have another comments/questions from visitors. So thank you for your presentation. I really appreciate the drive to collect signs, the proliferation of signs and signage. Sorry, okay, I'm trying to read the rest of the, of the question. Yeah, that struck me about the pandemic. My question, have you had an opportunity to request objects that represent the ups and downs of various waves, particularly something that represents the best summer ever, where many people thought we were over the pandemic in summer 2021?
We have put out a couple of calls, and some of our objects are as a result of that. I don't think we have anything that speaks to this. No, it would be wonderful to have something. So again, if you think you can help, get in touch.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Please get in touch with us. And more questions are coming up. So, hi, where are all those items stored? What if you run out of space?
Yeah.
Good question about collection sustainability.
That's a very good question and probably a little bit above my pay grade to answer. We have material stored in several locations. There is certainly some stored here, but we have other warehouses and locations as well. We have not run out of space yet, so don't let that affect whether you approach us to offer us something.
And another interesting question for you. So how about signs of dissent? How are you collecting the experience of anti-vaxxers during this period?
Sorry, can you I can't always see them in the chat. Can you repeat that?
Oh, okay. So how about collecting pandemic dissent? How are you collecting the experience of anti-vaxxers during the pandemic?
Right. Well, that is again something that we would like to do. We've had a couple of avenues not pan out. Again, you know, I think we are going to depend on people getting in touch with us. So no, we don't have anything specifically representing that at the moment. We would like to, for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. And we still have a few minutes before we wrap up our program. So if you have more questions, this is the right moment to ask them. Or if you have any comment or any pandemic stories that you would like to share, here we are to listen to you. Okay, I'm seeing some of our visitors are thanking us for these interesting programs. So thank you for attending. And let's see if we have more questions. Okay, well, I guess we are wrapping up the program. So Thank you again, Pat, for sharing these great stories. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this talk. I'm actually sure you enjoyed this talk because the stories were just phenomenal. And before we say goodbye, I just wanted to share a couple of things. So we have a quick program survey available at the end of this program. We want to hear from you. And again, we value your input. So we would like to know what kind of future programs and experiences you would like to see. So if you want to just spend a moment to compile this survey, the survey will open automatically in your browser at the end of the talk, and the data will be collected anonymously, of course. So if you don't want to participate, instead you just close your browser. I also wanted to remind you that we have another talk coming up on May 6th. In the next talk, which is called Berries and Birds, Exotic Plants Altering the Color of Birds, we're going to learn about the diet of several bird species and how the introduction of exotic plants in the bird's diet can impact the color of the plumage. So make sure to book your spot. Thank you everyone for attending Up Close, stories, objects, and ideas from beyond the galleries. I hope to see you at our next talk. Take care, everyone. Thank you again, Pat.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.